Welcome, guys. Today we have an awesome guest joining us, Alex Andresen. Alex works with TuneIn as a platform engineer, meaning working with backend, APIs.
Yep.
Do you mind sharing a little bit for those who don't know what TuneIn is and what you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So I work at a company called TuneIn. We do online radio, music, podcasts, sports. So basically, you can listen to any radio station in the world on your phone or on your laptop, and as well as with a premium subscription. If you pay us a monthly fee, you get access to any sports game like NFL, MLB, NBA, as well as audiobooks and commercial-free music.
So the reason everybody can listen to live streams of MLB is thanks to you? Is that fair to say or not?
Probably not, but
all right.
I help out on those
Okay.
things, yeah.
Well, I know one of the really interesting things about your career so far has been that you started out graduating from Cal Poly with a CS degree and joining Microsoft, but not quite as a strict software engineer, but as a software engineer in test. So
Yeah.
for people who don't know the distinction between those roles, do you mind kind of sharing what the distinction is?
Sure, yeah. So when I started at Microsoft, I started as an intern. So I interned for a summer between my junior and senior year, and that was a software engineer, or SDET, software development engineer and test intern. And so basically, you work alongside the software engineers that are actually writing the code, but you're responsible for more so obviously the testing of it, and the part I guess that differentiates like a QA from SDET would be that you're expected to write code and write automated tests like integration tests and things like that, other than just manual testing. So we would have to like create test plans, and our test plans would consist of automated and manual tests, but I personally hate like having to manually do things. Like,
Yeah.
I'd much rather write some code and have it, work and just be able to have this code run in a test suite every day, rather than every couple months have to have this test that I have to go and manually execute. So I was very much incentivized to write code as much as possible. And
Nice.
so yeah, I'd say that's the difference between a software engineer and software development engineer and test would be that you're still writing code, but you're writing automated tests.
So I know you've told me this offline about how you moved or were relocated in terms of job from working in test automation for Windows or for Microsoft,
Yeah.
to much more engineering heavy role before you left Microsoft to move to the San Francisco Bay Area from Washington, where Microsoft's based. Do you mind, for those who've never been through the very large corporate reorganization process, kind of give an idea of how you orient yourself through a process like a reorg?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I was at Microsoft for close to 5 years. So at a big company like that, there are a number of reorgs that happen. So I can't remember maybe there were like 3 real like reorgs that happened while I was there. So I guess like every like 1 to 2 years maybe there'd be a reorg, and some of them are bigger than others. Like maybe one of them we changed CEOs, I guess, and then like we changed like a vice president of like Windows, and like it's kind of interesting with the reorg, you can see it like trickle down. Like you're like, oh hey, like I just got an email that we now have a new VP, and it's like, oh okay, like who is this guy? Like you talk with your teammates about who this guy is, but then you go a couple months and like nothing changes, because he's still trying to figure out the people that are going to be under him. And then maybe a month or 2 later you get an email and it's like, oh, now we know who all the GMs will be, and it's like
General managers.
The general managers, exactly. And it's like, oh, okay, but that's still like 2 levels above me, so that's still not like super affecting me. But like once it gets around to that level, like they start figuring out their teams, and then that's when it like my manager, I was lucky enough to have a very good manager when I was at Microsoft, and she would like look out for me in these sorts of things and be like, she was a bit more political, I guess, and she would know what was going on. She'd go talk to people, go figure out like what was happening and where we'd go, and was like, come talk to me and be like, hey, okay, I think this is what's happening. This team is going like here. Like, do you want to come with me to this team? Like, I'd be like, all right, like, sounds good. But yeah, that stuff takes like, and then like maybe a couple weeks later, you get another email that comes out that's like, okay, these will be the teams under the general manager, and so it's like from the time where you know like got a new VP to when like my actual job changes is like a few months, which is kind of crazy. But
so I mean, I don't know how novel this story is, but one thing I think is really cool for our audience to know is that Alex met his wife at his job at Microsoft in Seattle, and so
true story.
I mean, having met your wife there and having been there for 5 full years, you were just telling me about how when you were considering moving on career-wise, what was your thought process? How did you find a job outside of the Microsoft bubble?
Yeah, so I guess my wife and I had been talking for a little while. We're both from the Bay Area, so we live in the Bay Area now. Yeah, we both grew up around here. I'd been in Seattle, I guess when we were talking about this, it'd been like, I'd been up there a little over 4 years, and she had been up there a little over 3 years. And I kind of always figured I'd come back to the Bay Area someday, but I was like, Seattle's cool, like, I'm enjoying what I'm doing at Microsoft, like, things are good, like, but maybe one day. And my wife, you know, we talked about it, and we're like, okay, like, you know, maybe now's a good time to make this move. So yeah, I guess in that time I had transitioned from like software development engineer and test to software engineer. I was working on like internal tools for our like app
marketplace.
Yeah, so exactly. So yeah, for at that time for Windows 10, the app like backend ingestion flow, I was building internal tools to give insight into our teams about how apps were flowing through, like where they were getting stuck, what was going on there. So I had already made a little bit of a transition away from testing, and I knew that I kind of wanted to move all the way, I guess, to be a software development engineer. So at that time I was building internal tools, so I was like using the same sort of skills that you need as a software engineer, but I was applying those to internal tools, and I wanted to apply those to like customer facing products. So yeah, when I was looking for a job, I had a couple of things I was looking for. One, I wanted to be a software engineer working on customer facing products, and I wanted to try out a smaller company. Like, I'd been at Microsoft, you know, for almost 5 years by then. They're, you know, not a small company.
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of friends that work at small companies, and I wanted to see what it was like, to try something different. So
coming down from having spent your first 5 years of your career at Microsoft,
yeah,
probably getting very deep into the .NET Microsoft stack of programming tools, was job searching in the Bay Area harder? Are there a specific network of employers who are specifically looking for people familiar with the Microsoft stack?
Yeah, so I guess when I was interviewing, that was definitely a concern I had. I felt like I had kind of two, I guess, big things that I was looking to change, I guess, other than location, but to the employer. Like, one being I wanted to be a software engineer working on customer-facing products, which I hadn't done before. So that was a bit of during the interview process, like, okay, well, you clearly haven't done this before, that I had to prove. And yeah, the second thing was, like, yeah, I was familiar with C#.NET. I had done Java in college, but it had been a few years, and I would, you know, be pretty rusty on it. Mm-hmm. So I guess I didn't use that as a criteria in what I was looking for. I just, like, went online, looked for different companies that I thought that were interesting and positions, and just applied. And also used, like, the network of people that I have down here from growing up around here, and asking them, you know, hey, how do you like your job? Like, do you have any openings? Like, do you have any referrals or anything you could refer me to? And actually, one of my friends who's who's down here. He works at Sequoia, and he recommended me to their like Sequoia recruiter who manages a bunch of things, and that's actually how I got the TuneIn job.
This is a huge tip. I don't think people realize this, but job boards are not your only option for finding jobs or going to company websites and looking at their careers page. Another option is that venture capital firms are constantly trying to help their portfolio companies find employees. So like Alex was just saying, one great option is if you have any kind of referral into a venture capital company like Sequoia, you can email your resume to them and they'll circulate it to all of the hiring managers at all of their portfolio companies. So that's a freaking awesome piece of advice that I don't think we've surfaced on our interviews so far. So
yeah, it was a pretty sweet setup actually, because I like met with the recruiter at Sequoia who wasn't like the recruiter at the company I was applying at, and so she was like definitely trying to help me, you know, because she wants to land jobs at the companies that Sequoia works with, and then she referred me to a number of different recruiters. I had a few interviews with them, and I worked out with TuneIn. So it was like a in the door referrals, you know, definitely helps your chances.
For sure. Yeah. Something you were just saying about how the C#.NET skill set that you were bringing from your 5 years at Microsoft did not filter your job search criteria. Like you were not solely looking at jobs that put C#.NET on their qualifications for roles.
Yeah.
Is there a whole lot of crossover between Java, C#? Like, did you try applying to any companies where Java and JVM were a main part of their stack?
I did, yeah. I guess I did get interviews, you know, at places that, you know, had Python stacks, had Java stacks, had, you know, non.NET stacks. I did, you know, feel like that was, you know, like I didn't have, I guess, the best starting position with companies like that, where I'd be like, hey, you know, like I haven't used this language before. Like I'm gonna need some time to ramp up. But I guess I don't feel like it was like a huge blocker, but TuneIn actually was .NET based, so I do feel like that was a step up in terms of getting, you know, making myself look like a good candidate
for sure
to them.
Yeah. Do candidates who come into TuneIn today, do you guys require C#.NET experience?
No. So we didn't require it then. We still don't require it, and we're not only .NET also today. Like our web stack is like Node.js, React. We're also on the back end like moving towards like Golang and different languages.
Got it.
Yeah. So at TuneIn we don't care what language you use.
Polyglot.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'm at a loss for questions at the moment. One thing I will say about that VC referral network thing is that I know that many VCs or portfolio companies have a shared either email list or even a private Slack where there are channels on Slack of hiring managers where VCs will publish resumes. So if you do end up trying to email a VC or the right point of contact at a VC, they may end up posting your resume to a shared email list or a shared channel where hiring managers can take a look at who you are and what skills you've got and experience you've got. So
that's a good point. I think also that reminded me of something like when you're like reaching out to these like recruiter types. Another tip that my wife gave me is that like you should always reach out to them like assuming that they're gonna pass whatever you said on to someone else. Mm-hmm. So you should like write it up in a way that, you know, makes yourself, you know, not look good just to them, but also to who you think they're gonna pass it on to, and, you know, try to include the information that they would want to know to make their job easier. Like the recruiter's going to like you more if, you know, you give them all the stuff they need and they just like forward the email to the hiring manager like, hey, check out this guy. Mm-hmm. Like you're making their life easier, and you're giving, you know, making yourself look good in as much ways as possible.
I think some unique perspective that you might have about the job market for people in their first 5 years of their career or even beyond is that having spent 5 years at Microsoft, that kind of tenure is abnormal in the Bay Area. Like in the Bay Area, people are constantly maybe transitioning jobs to try and get better pay, better titles, or losing jobs due to companies going under or projects not working out. So coming from Seattle, what are some of the big distinctions you see, even among your friends, about how the job market functions here versus in a land of bigger employers?
That's a good question. So I guess in the Bay Area, there's a lot more companies, I guess, is the main thing I've noticed. I guess I mean, I guess part of this comes from me being more senior today than I was then, but like I get hit up on LinkedIn like a lot more now than I did like working at Microsoft. I think that I guess it's not a really fair comparison because I have more years and more experience and more diversity in my talents. But I guess I would say that when I was looking for jobs in the Bay Area, I guess the main difference I noticed was there was a lot more companies, and they're like companies were like smaller, whereas like Seattle at the time, I think that's definitely changing more today than it was then. But it was like Microsoft and Amazon were like
the two omnipotent employers.
Like if you were a software engineer in Seattle, like you probably worked there. That's definitely changing, but a couple years ago that was very much the case. And coming down here, like hanging out with friends and stuff, I guess maybe Google's like the joke down here that everyone works for Google, but people
it's
definitely
not true.
Yeah, exactly. It's not true. People work for tons of different companies, and so I guess that the diversity in companies and stuff was probably one of the biggest things that I noticed was the difference. Yeah.
One of the things I'm curious about is if you've observed any kind of difference in how working from home is a more normal decision among employees, or whether employees today or at smaller companies like that exist in the Bay Area have more leverage to say, I want to work from home today, in contrast to maybe over the 5 years you were at Microsoft.
Yeah, that's true. I think people have more flexibility here in terms of like being able to work from home, and I have a number of coworkers that work from home like maybe once or twice a week, and I also have someone on my direct team that lives in New Hampshire, so he's a remote employee. And definitely at Microsoft, like that was not the case. Like people were in the office like every day, and I didn't work with anyone remote, although we had like remote teams, I guess, but those were like different teams entirely. But there's more flexibility, I think, in terms of like at a smaller company, like they can make things work for you a little bit more than at a bigger company where they're like, no, this is how it is.
For sure. I know this is probably a super controversial topic, but I'm gonna ask anyways. About
right. I'm gonna grab a drink then.
Sure. About maternity and paternity leave. Do you think it's easier to raise a family in the Bay Area versus working for a large megacorp in Seattle, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft? And I say this knowing that you yourself don't have children yet, so it's kind of a controversial topic, but I'm curious for your perspective on, even just anecdotally, about coworkers you've had. How do people in tech, in engineering roles, work around having families in their lives?
Yeah.
Shockingly.
What are families? So I don't have any kids, so I don't I guess speak from personal experience, but I have seen, I guess, other coworkers have kids, and I guess I never really thought about that. But at Microsoft, you'd see someone would have a kid, and they'd be gone for like a month or two, and then they'd come back, and they would be back full time doing their thing, and it was just like, oh wait, how's your baby? But at TuneIn, like I guess right now I have a coworker who just had a kid like a month ago, and like every week we're like, hey, like what's going on? He's like, sometimes he's working like half-time, sometimes he's not. He's just like kind of, it's like a pretty fluid situation, and it's like when he has time he does some work, and when he doesn't, then he doesn't. And like my manager is cool with that, and of course I don't know the details of that exactly, but I also have another coworker who's from Ukraine, and when he joined TuneIn, he knew he was going to have a kid, and he was like, hey, I want to work for 1 month in Ukraine and then take a 1 month vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, okay. And so he's done that like 2 years in a row now. And yeah, I definitely didn't see at Microsoft that sort of situation. So.
It's interesting because you'd imagine with larger companies, they'd have more of a formal policy in place that's more family friendly and kind of more socialist for the communitarian good. But it sounds like that might not be the case. And you might actually, as an employee, in some cases have more leverage when you're working for a smaller company because you're a more important cog in the wheel.
Yeah, I think that, definitely, like you're a higher percentage of the company's employees, so they need to, bend the rules a little bit to make it work for you. And like at a company like the size of Microsoft, like they have like official rules for like everything. It's like paternity is like, oh, go to the paternity
HR paternity office.
Exactly. Like there's a web page and it tells you all the stuff, and if you want an exception, you got to reach out and deal with that. Whereas at a smaller company, like I don't think we have a web page for paternity leave. Like you go talk to your manager, talk to the HR person, and like figure out how to make it work.
So I know you got your bachelor's in CS, and your first job out of college was SDET, software development engineering test.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I find really interesting from talking to engineers is how big a portion of your skill set and education comes from self-teaching. So do you mind sharing for our audience how you went about leveling up your skills as you went through the multiple reorgs that happened over your tenure at Microsoft, and how you prepared yourself skills-wise for a new job outside of Microsoft?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess starting out as a tester, I was definitely more just like in the world of how to write tests, like what are good test cases, like how to find edge cases and different things to think of, which is at the time, like, or I still like testing, and I just wanted to move on to something different. I like moved from, I guess, being a tester to like internal tools. It wasn't like an official move, but I was like, hey, like I would talk with the manager about this, like, hey, like, well, she knew I hated doing any manual tests, but I was like, hey, I like building things, and so we'd talk and figure out like something I could build to like help the team in some way. So at first it was kind of like unofficial, like where I was like building some tools and still writing some tests, and then like with one of the reorgs, we got like moved around to like where my official role was to build these tools, and I already had like a little bit of a leg in. But yeah, I guess in terms of what I did for interviews, I got this book. I think it's Cracking the Coding Interview.
Oh yeah, super popular.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. If you're interviewing for a software development role, like read this book.
So I know it's probably a longer book and it probably includes lots of examples, but do you mind paraphrasing the type of interview that it prepares you for?
Yeah, so I guess it prepares you more for the algorithmic side. Is like a lot of the book is like arrays, strings, linked lists, binary trees, hash tables, like a lot, like most of the book is dedicated to that, but they also have a section at the beginning for like behavioral.
Sure. Tell me about your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, they had this cool table for like good things to prepare for going into interview. It was like write down your like top 3 like most interesting projects, like least or like projects that didn't work out, like toughest bugs. Like I don't remember the exact, but they had like intelligent ways of making you like remember like, oh wait, I actually do have a cool story if they ask me this question because of the worksheets or whatever that did they go through. So yeah, for this book I didn't go through like every page, but like I definitely looked through and was like, oh, like I don't really remember much about like binary trees, like I should brush up on this. But then like arrays, I was like, oh, I know about arrays, like I don't need to spend that much time on this section.
So when you interviewed with TuneIn, or that round of job seeking,
yeah,
how much algorithmic type of interviewing did you encounter? I mean, something I've heard is much more common these days is the skills test, where as opposed to asking reverse an array efficiently or do anagram detection efficiently and prove it, the questions will be more along the line of, here's some code with a bug in it, let's work through together fixing the bug, or here's a set of features, implement these features. When you were doing your last job seeking round before joining TuneIn, what kind of was the breakdown of how many interviews did you encounter that were algorithmic versus skills tests, or both?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I guess I was, it wasn't like super heavy algorithmic, I guess, which is good. I think.
For sure.
Like I guess the main exception to that was when I interviewed at Google, and it was like all like pretty heavy hitting algorithm questions. But mostly the other companies weren't necessarily like, they didn't care if you didn't know how to balance a tree, or the like didn't know the optimal way to, it was more so like, do you understand the concepts, like can you like think through this problem, like I want, like at TuneIn, one of the things we try to look for in our interviews is not like, do you know this algorithm, but like, can you like problem solve, like can you think, like here's a problem, like how would you solve this, like let's walk through, there's no right answer, like what sorts of things would you think about. We just want to see how people think, and see if, of course they have, like you need to have some sort of skill prerequisite in terms of like software engineering knowledge, but it's a lot more like can you like think on the fly, and like I lost my train of thought.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you hold very strong opinions on this topic, but one of the things that I've come to reflect on in doing interviewing of people and being interviewed is how it's important as a hiring manager, or as somebody, as a member of a hiring team, to ask the same question of multiple candidates.
Yeah.
Like if you don't ask the same question every time, it's harder to contrast and compare candidates. Like if you ask one hard question to one person and one softball to another, you'll end up getting a very distorted view of who you're interviewing. Like Definitely. What is the caliber of candidate? So I guess knowing that you guys probably at TuneIn have a stable of questions that you ask, how do you manage asking the same question of each candidate without it leaking out what your guys' magic sauce is for interviewing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I guess like another thing I did when I was interviewing was there was like a group of friends, and we like had like a spreadsheet that we like put together, like interview questions that got asked at different companies.
Yeah.
And like that was another thing I looked at. So yeah, I guess, maybe I should go do some Googling to see if the TuneIn interview questions are leaked. But I definitely agree with like what you said, that it's like important to ask the same questions, and it like, because I interview people like a lot now, because we're very much looking for engineers, and asking the same question to different people like really allows you to really see who does well, and really see like who doesn't do well. Like the first few times I asked like the question, like it was like, oh well, they like did okay, like I don't know if I should say they shouldn't work here. And then it was like asked it to like someone good, and was like, oh, okay, this was a good response, like now I can kind of calibrate that.
I know, interviewing aside, both of us work on back-end infrastructure and engineering and that type of thing. Do you have any strong opinions about what skills in that area of the business of software engineering are going to be tremendously valuable in the near future? What what you personally are trying to get better at in the next year or two?
In terms of like interviewing aside, you mean?
Yeah, like programming languages or infrastructure or technologies. Which ones are you super interested in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'm personally, I guess, interested in like you know, the cloud is obviously a thing, but the whole like serverless idea of, you know, like lambdas, like AWS Lambda, for example. You know, you just put some code up there and then you say like, hey, execute my code, and like and it just returns the value, and you're like, cool. Like, you don't care that it went and spun up some machine, deployed the code, ran it. You know, they had to deal with auto scaling of like how many times you call it. You know, like it's just like whatever.
Hands free.
Exactly.
I mean, that's their promise, but one of the main drawbacks to that I'm worried about, and why I haven't yet done the time investment into learning how to use serverless, whether on any of the public clouds like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, all three of them have their own offerings of this kind at this point, is that it's hard to replicate what is happening in production locally.
Absolutely.
Which is pretty annoying. I mean, in the old model where you provision the servers and you monitor the servers in however form, there's a dev production parity of some kind. Yeah. And when you can't control your own serverless instance on your MacBook or on your Windows machine, it's a little bit harder to catch the edge cases where there's a difference between development and production, and that's where, God knows, so many back end problems happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. Being able to run these things locally and debug them locally when there's no actual server. You know, of course they actually run on something, but to you, there's no server to run on. That's very hard, because we have to like write our own kind of test harness thing around it to be able to run these functions locally. But of course, it's not the same environment that they run in. And we've encountered some funny issues with them that, you know, like we had to just add logging and watch and see how it performed, because you couldn't reproduce it locally. But yeah, and serverless I think is cool, but it's, you know, it's not good for everything. Like if you have really high like intensive use, like load, for example, like you don't want to pay to all that cost. Like you might as well spin up your own instance that's always running.
There's a premium.
Yeah.
You get a serious discount in the cloud with reserved instances, and I don't think there's any such thing as reserve pricing for Lambdas yet.
No, I don't think so. They have like a free tier, like you can do like X number of requests for free, and then you pay after that.
Yeah, HPC or high performance computing is not jiving with serverless that well. I know
I can see that.
Some of the work that I'm doing currently, we do video rendering, and one of the big constraints of Lambdas across cloud providers, whether AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, is that they put very serious constraints on how much hardware is provisioned per Lambda invocation, and also about how long the Lambda can run for. So if you have a long-running task that you have a hard time breaking down into smaller tasks, this is another case where using Lambdas might break down.
Absolutely.
But we're still in the very early days, so
yeah, for
I am also extremely optimistic about serverless.
I would, you know, if you don't have to deal with machine management at all, like as a software engineer, that's great. Less to think about, but of course, that doesn't mean that it solves all your problems. Like we just talked about, there's a number of different drawbacks that you have to take into account and decide if it's the right solution for your problem.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. This has been a freaking awesome conversation. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
Yeah, of course. It was fun.
Awesome, yeah. I'm sure we'll do this again soon. If you guys have questions for Alex, is there a way people can reach you, whether about career or tech or jobs at TuneIn?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to reach out at TuneIn, I guess I'm Andresen at tunein.com, or I'm sure Max can figure out
I can connect you,
to connect us. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Alex.
Yeah.